Welcome to the Grow Renaissance podcast. Let's nourish the world.
All right, welcome back to Pasture Primetime. Season 2 already, can't believe it, 2026. This is Season 2, Episode 2, and today I'm really excited to be stepping into a world that we don't often talk about. A world focused around horses, a world focused around holistic healing, and I've got some amazing individuals who I actually met at the latter part of 2025, all the way over in Hawaii. Today we're joined by Ryan and Regan Goss. They've together, collectively, worked with horses, had an extraordinary journey. They've built horse-first systems that really focus on clear communication, no drama, and allowing learning to speak from the horse's language that moves directly into us as humans in terms of our own dealings with mental health and food, relationship components. And so today we're going to be talking a little bit about some of these aspects and really start to take away some learnings, hopefully, for all of us that are listening, and just continue to feed you with more knowledge about some of our great community members or soon-to-be community members in our Grow ecosystem. So Regan and Ryan, thank you so much for taking some time today on a Friday to jump on this podcast with me and share a little bit about your journey. And I would actually love to pass the mic over to you, and maybe that's a good spot to start, is fill in some of the gaps on your journey and what led you to be where you are today.
Awesome. Thanks for having us on here, Neil. We're very excited to get connected with Grow and really the whole ecosystem as it is. This is going to be, we're hooked up to the fire hose right now and trying to take it all in. But the how horses can help us is, I think, pretty much ingrained in Regan and I from our beginnings in the equestrian world to what we're in the process of morphing this horse assisted, what we're really calling horse assisted learning or horse assisted growth, even, which is I love connecting with Grow the community, because really that's what we're all about at this point is how can we help people grow. Right. And so, I think we'll touch on some of our story, some of Regan's story, and some of my story as it relates to what you guys are doing in what you're bringing to the community with all the mapping of the beef. I absolutely love that. We have our own beef here. And so understanding the power of knowing everything that's gone into that thing that I'm about to consume is so powerful. So I don't want to ramble on too long. I want to be poignant here with the information we're bringing. My background is in equestrian competition. So I from Canada as well, living down here in the States now. But back in 2008, I tried to make the Olympic team for the Canadian 3-day eventing. Didn't quite get there, but got close, right? And so learned a lot about the industry at that high level. And I think it's probably speaks to every industry at high level, that there are things that go on that maybe you're not super excited about. Maybe they're not true to the passion, the reason, all of that. And so that's a big push for us in establishing this new system where we're using horses, and we are using athletic horses that have other jobs, right? These are horses that are out, can go and compete. We're trying to differentiate ourselves from the equine therapy, and that's not us in so much as what we've seen for the most part as it relates to equine therapy is there's a lot of horses that can't do anything else. And so there's still a ban, and don't get me wrong, like anytime you can walk outside, there's a benefit, right? And if you can walk outside and go hang out with a horse, your benefit has probably gone over tenfold. Regan can speak to a lot of why that is, and we're learning as we grow this, we're learning more and more and more about the effects of just being around the stinking animal, really, right? Like hang out with them, what they provide. And I don't know if you want to jump into that piece of what they provide for us just when we walk up to them.
That's amazing. You. Just before we jump into to hear Regan, I'd like to pull on the thread there, Ryan. You mentioned these are working horses. Maybe you could share, some of the breeds. I grew up with quarter horses, being a rancher, and Canadian horses in Canada, which is a specific breed. But maybe you could share some of that.
Really, I love that because as much as it's not breed specific for us, it's just individual personality, right? Like we do have a quarter horse, Paint. He's awesome. Tarzan is probably like of all the horses that I've ever interacted with, he's one of the most interesting personalities. And not because he's so flamboyant, right? Just because he's so like, just knows who he is. And there's a major benefit to what we're trying to do in helping people in having an individual that is so confident in himself. So my background way back, like started as when I was a year and a half years old, 1.5 years old. My parents were both in racing. They decided it'd be a good idea to throw Ryan on this racehorse that just finished a race and lead him around the shed. So that was my introduction. I started on a horse at 1.5 years old. I had a little pony that lived at the racetrack, and I would go ride on the weekends, right? So I've been riding a horse since I was 3 years old. So thoroughbreds are a big passion for me, not just in the racing industry. I worked that industry for a long time. Lots of stories there, but also their next life, right? Taking the racehorse, the thoroughbred, and making them into a show horse or a useful afterlife. And I did that for a long time. That was my focus as when I was competing, was mostly with thoroughbred horses. And so there's a soft spot for me there. But we've also got a warm blood imported from Germany, who amazing athlete. But when we found him, he had some health issues. He had some
trauma.
Really, truly, like he was one of those guys, and this people will relate to this. He was one of those guys that's super talented, and so a lot of stuff in his training got skipped because he was good at it. And so, but unfortunately, and we all know, when you get to kind of competing at that top level, if you don't have a firm base, you're going to fall through the holes. And that happened with him. And so he had very traumatic experiences before we found him, to the point where he didn't really even understand that he was a horse. He'd been boxing, he'd been in a stall, he'd been in a program, he'd been controlled to find, and you'll hear this theme probably throughout us, is he'd been humanized, over humanized. He didn't understand how to go out and be a horse in the herd. And so for us, in order to be able to help bring him back and rehabilitate him, the first thing we had to do was say, you're a horse, go be a horse. So that then we can talk to you like you're a horse, because that's the biggest piece of our training side of it. And it's bleeding into the growth, personal development work, is learning how to talk like they do, right? I learned early on that we, as the alpha species, right, we're supposed to be top of the chain, so we're supposed to be the smart ones. So it made more sense for me that we would be bilingual, speak our language, speak their language, than make them bilingual and speak their own language and try and learn ours. And so that's been a big push in expediting how do you have them stay happy when they're doing what you want them to do? Well, at least talk their language.
Yeah, I love that. And Regan, I didn't mean to jump in there. I'd love to hear your story too, and the journey, but thanks for that, Ryan.
No, yeah, and I love hearing every time he speaks about it. It's something that is so passionate to us, and it's been our entire lives, being in different elements of the horse industry. I have a background, did veterinary anesthesia for a while, and so did a lot of teaching and training in different veterinary hospitals doing gas anesthesia. And again, and I also come from a competition background, not nearly to the extent of what Ryan does, but have been fortunate enough to live in different parts of the world and really learn different cultures and the way that, we think we're so different, but really when we get down to the bare roots of it, we're all very much the same, all have similar challenges. Everybody has ups and downs, and So for us to really go through the journey that we've had separately and individually in what I'm going to call the animal space, because it's not even just limited to horses, they're just kind of top of the list for us.
Mm-hmm.
We feel so fortunate to have been really led to where we are in what's next. And I do not consider it an accident by any stretch that happened to, hear Will speak in Hawaii. I was only there for really a day and a half, and grateful that I was able to be invited and included in that situation, because it was really something that opened my mind to this entire community that I've been craving and thriving but didn't even know existed. And so, I connected with what Will had to say in your conversation, and, broke down in tears because my mind was literally blown by what is being created, what you guys are doing at Grow, what the entire community is doing for humanity. So not sure exactly the role that we're going to be able to play and contribute and what that looks like going forward, other than we are excited that we've actually, without really knowing what the heck we're doing, got a match bundle. Yeah, in December.
Amazing.
We've got our our Grow NFT, a bunch of the other NFTs, and have just done everything we can to try to dive in and learn about all of this.
That's wonderful. And it's a starting spot, and it's probably much like working with horses for those that haven't. It's small stepping stones. I remember taking friends out to my farm, and they hadn't been around horses, and saying, "Oh, put the bridle on," and they're like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "Oh,
Right.
yeah, I guess you've never done this." And they didn't even know what a bridle looked like, just to say a bridle. And so it's wonderful to have you part of the community. I really think what you're going to bring as value is this knowledge base. So we connected, obviously, Regan, you and I, and talked a little bit about the mental health component and capital A agriculture, which I think encloses livestock and equestrian industry. But there's this, and it could be outside of capital A agriculture as well. There's this prevailing component that we continue to face in our world, and it is mental health that's slapping us in the face faster than we can catch up. And outside of going to programs and taking medication and talking to therapists, which I think is good, there's just this need to reconnect with what I call nature, and that is inclusive of animals. But we still need the stewards to sort of guide us and say, to Brian, to your point, can we learn to speak horse so that we can connect with that? And what does that return us spiritually, mentally, physically? And then, what does it return them? And what energies? I was walking by somebody with a dog a couple of days ago, and the dog just started going yapping left, right, and center. And then when I knelt down to it, it actually rolled over, and I take out its tummy, and the owner says it never stops. And I said, well, it's because it's trying to communicate, and we're not communicating, and I didn't put it in those eloquent words. I'm just sort of picking up on what you said, Ryan. But I said we have to get down to its level. And when we're super giants, we seem like dominant figures, and it's scared. And when we get down to its level, it realizes, hey, you're the same as me, and to some degree, I'm a pack animal. Dogs being pack animals, looking for leadership, looking for stewards. But I think us as humans, even though we're the alpha, by and large, a lot of us are continuously wanting to be surrounded by, we call it community, but a pack. People that are head and heart aligned. And that's what we're growing at Grow, not to overuse that word or over-index it, but we are certainly cultivating this community of head and heart related individuals. And so to have both of you come in and help us be guided to these areas of nature that might even give us a little more breathing room under our collar so we can deal with the different stressors and mental thoughts that we have, and whether it's mental health or just on the fringe of that, or just having a bad day. How do we connect with our tribe, and then how do we take that knowledge and go out to nature and start implementing it for our own well-being?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well said.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've asked you this before. Do you remember or know who Edgar Casey was.
I've heard the name. Yeah, and I do remember you asking me about this, but yes, please elaborate on that.
So he had a prediction or a prophecy or whatever. He I think was known for a bunch of different things, but definitely ahead of his time. And one of his predictions or prophets was that and this is over 100 years ago that this was done, made a prediction that our world would get to such a digital technical place that it would be through the connection of horses that humanity would actually start to realign and connect. And I'll send it to you because it's one of those things that I feel like we as people that have grown up with agriculture, horses, animals, we've experienced what some of those benefits are even without knowing. I know for me, it's been an incredible process to go through life, have horses as a competitive and business piece of what we've done. And now that we've gotten to a place where, we were away from horses for 10 years, and that's a whole nother story. But us coming back to horses, we know this has been because we've had years of communication and understanding of them, and it's been our purpose to be able to help people connect in a way that a lot of people don't understand is even possible.
So maybe for our listeners, you could share some of the things we get from horses, whether we recognize it or not, and if somebody walked up to a horse and started stroking, what are some of those things they might feel or take away from that interaction?
I think you should touch on the sympathetic nervous system. It's amazing that there's a level of people that understand horses, have had them in the past, and where maybe a couple of tweaks in just how we interact with them can change that whole dynamic. And there's definitely power in that. There is so much more, fortunately, I'm going to say, power in that person that has no idea, never done anything. The moment they are with it, and they don't even have to physically touch, but as soon as they get within a certain energetic range,
about 5 feet. Yeah. So it's about 5 feet of being within a horse's energy. And I mean, everything on the planet is energy, right? And so you get within about 5 feet of a horse, and their heart has the ability to literally re-regulate our heartbeats. And so there's a piece of the brain as well. We've got the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, right? And we think of, parasympathetic is when we're in a place of, for lack of lumping it into terminology, of being more grounded. Sympathetic is more of the fight or flight when we're dealing with stress, when we're dealing with when our bodies are dealing with food that is not actual nourishment, right? All of these things can contribute to our brains being in more of a state of fight or flight. And so one of the really interesting pieces, and there's science that backs this, being within space and connection energy with horses has the ability to help people shift from sympathetic to parasympathetic in their brains. And so you take everything from, we've had law enforcement people that we've worked with who work with kids and people that have been involved in trafficking, like incredibly traumatic experiences that traditional therapies have not been able to really dive into or really open the door to. And we've introduced horses as a partnership in some of these different growth situations. And it's mind blowing what we've seen, what we've been able to be a part of. And a lot of it is to do with just that, helping the brain shift from, we talk about mental wellness, being in fight or flight, being in a space of, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm afraid, I don't even know why, back to, it's going to be okay. And that's, if there's nothing else that we can take from horses, it's how can we reconnect, as you say, humanity, and help us all find a place where it's going to be okay.
Yeah. I love that. And it's certainly very true. I mean, the energies we don't recognize and how they affect us. And so, I know that to be true with the likes of the picture behind me here, and, I could see that being true with horses as well. Maybe you could share a little bit. You mentioned just briefly there on the drive-by, you've had your own health and food experience or story, and eating wholesome food, is a large part of our grow community. Eat healthy, and the big announcement that just happened, I'm not sure if you saw it or read about it, but the inverted pyramid now of our food structure that came out from the USDA, at a high level, wonderful, right? Eating real food, I think was really the big message I took out of that. It's something we've been promoting for a long time. So to hear that there's this energy of others that, is starting to create this swell, I think it's wonderful. But I digress, and I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey. And I know our audience, who there's many out there that have ailments and different health issues, chronic health issues in a lot of cases. And eating healthy, eating holistically, I think is a key component to how we combat that.
Absolutely.
Agreed. Yeah.
I thank you for asking. It will be 54 this month. And in my early 30s, I had actually lived and competed in Europe with horses, and had moved back to the States, to Florida, which is where Ryan and I met, again, for horses, and was diagnosed with reproductive cancer. We actually hadn't even met yet. And I was at a place where I didn't have time for this, right? I mean, we never have time for the things that really matter, like our health, until we need to. And so I had gone through actually 4 different procedures. The doctors at the time had said to me, you should have a hysterectomy, and my that opened a door for me to my introduction to acid alkaline eating. And so like anything that I've ever done in life, I'm full board, I'm all in, or I'm not. And I went on a spiritual journey, very much aligning what I put in my mouth and in my mind, and all aspects of that. My belief is, God gave me the tools, and I was obedient, and He healed me. But going from, and I know I'm not alone in this type of story, you hear it more and more. This is something that happened for me and was really kind of a transition for me. I had come from a background of working in, as I said, veterinary anesthesia and the pharmaceutical space. And so 20 plus years ago, having that door opened of that's not what God has put on the planet necessarily. I'm not saying I'm against, I got to be really careful here what I'm saying, but again, we go to the foundation of the things that we're putting in our body and where they're sourced and how they're sourced and all of those pieces.
There's a time and a place for medication. There's a time and a place for doctors and hospitals. If you break your leg, go get it looked after. However, you probably should take control of your own health decisions as far as what food you put in.
And it's something that was so powerful for us. I mean, I was told after the surgeries I probably wouldn't be able to get pregnant and have kids. We're blessed with one son that I had when I was 39. And, but, it's a different mindset. And again, I'm grateful that we have been able to get connected with so many like-minded people wanting to have that transparency and connection to figure out what is right from my body.
Yeah. Well, I'm very grateful, and thanks be to God to the fact that you've found a path through food, and just being aware of how that can actually nourish the body, and actually revert some of the chronic issues. I think whether it's apathy or just lack of education or a mixture of both, we default very quickly to putting a pill in our mouth, or seeking the medical solution. And again, there's nothing wrong with the medical world, but there is a need to better understand what we can do, what we have control over. And that's usually how I like to phrase it. What do we have control over that we can fix and change? And we find those thresholds, right? We might not be able to control everything. And so then we need, the aid of those that are practicing wonderful medicine. But if we can at least mitigate some of that and start to take control, I grew up in a household where, my sisters were allergic to everything. I was a black sheep. I wasn't allergic to anything. We had to take droplets on our skin and figure out, what things. I tell my wife all the time, I say I grew up with orange juice in my cereal because my sisters were allergic to milk. And I just thought it was normal. Like, that's just something we did. And she's like, what are you talking about? I was like, and then we found raw milk.
Right.
And so, it's a little bit of how you position your views on it, right? When it's normal and normalized, you just do it. Orange juice and cereal to me is normal. It's not normal for everyone. Raw milk to me is normal. It's not normal for everyone. It's becoming a little more of a conversation piece today. But, and a lot of this derives to the well-being of animals, and we raised a lot of these beasts that I have behind me here. And, it's amazing to me when you see meat that looks sensuous and you salivate almost versus that isn't, and you can almost sense the resonation from how that animal's well-being was cared for or not cared for. I think my wife thinks I'm a bit crazy sometimes because I was like, this is a good animal, a good life, and we're digesting it. But that mind and spirit connection to what we're eating also changes the way we absorb and digest and the way we process it. Which I know I'm speaking to the choir on that, but
love hearing you say it.
Hey, man,
Love
keep
hearing
going,
you
keep
say
going.
it.
You're
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. So in thinking about some of the things that...
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Grow Renaissance podcast. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe this episode. Remember, it will take a community of us to do the best in the world and truly nourish not only ourselves, but the planet, the atmosphere, the soil, the plants, and the animals on it. So make sure you spread this message anywhere that you can.